roll. Hey guys, this is Steli Efti with Close.io. Today I'm super excited to talk to Rafael Parker from Segment. He's the VP of sales there. But funny enough, just a short while ago, just 2 or 3 years ago, he was a junior BDR himself. So today we're going to talk about kind of his fast track journey from being a junior sales resource to becoming a sales leader in a company that's exploding and super successful. And also talking about the unique sales challenges that Segment has selling to developers, doing kind of a bottom-up sales into the org, and primarily working with inbound sales versus outbound, which is what a lot of companies do in the Valley right now. So, hey, Rafael, thanks for taking the time. I'm super excited about this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's first talk about you a little bit. Just before we started recording, you asked me, what's your background? Because my name is funny and my accent is kind of all over the place. So let me return the question now when we're recording. Like, what is your background? Where are you coming from? Like, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So Raphael is actually a Hebrew name, so I'm a Jewish kid from the East Coast. And like many Jewish kids from the East Coast who are very chatty, their parents take a look at their chatty kid and they go, "Oh my God, this kid, he should be a lawyer." And so probably against, I don't know, without having really thought about it too much, I ended up going to law school. And then I ended up becoming a corporate lawyer for several years in New York at a big law firm. And hated doing that, burned out pretty quickly, found that I wasn't actually talking to anybody. I was sitting alone in a room at 4 a.m., circling commas on pages that nobody was ever going to read. And so after a few years of doing that, I quit. I sold all my stuff. My girlfriend and I got on bicycles to ride around the world. We rode around the world for a couple of years. And then I guess 3 years ago last week, we ended up in San Francisco and decided to look for some kind of new job. And so I wanted to get a job in business development because that seemed like the only thing I could do with a law degree that wasn't practicing law, but I had no experience and nobody would return my calls. And so I tried to get a junior position in business development, which I found out is just sales. So the only business development job I could find that didn't require experience was a business development representative, which as we now know is a BDR. And so that's how I got my start in sales.
That is awesome. So first of all, I don't know, Jewish, Greek, I don't know where the connection there is, but my grandfather thought I'd be a lawyer. My grandmother wanted me to be a priest. So that seems to be a pretty standard thing, just again, like chatty kid, right?
Yeah.
But I was not good enough to make it through school. I was not determined enough and committed enough. So I dropped out of school much earlier. But then the crazy thing is that you went on a around the world bike trip, basically.
Oh, yeah.
That is insane. How long? 2-3 years, you said?
That was about 2 years. Before law school, I had started a nonprofit organization. I guess when I was in college, I always wanted to go camping. I'd never been camping, but lived in New York and didn't have a car. So got on a bicycle and did my first camping trip over a weekend. Thought it was really cool. Honestly, probably early shades of sales. So I had my first job out of college. I was working at some stupid in just an office. And there was a woman there who wasn't registered to vote, and that just really upset. I was just couldn't believe that a person wouldn't be registered to vote. So I went to the Board of Elections in New York City, and I asked, I said, "Can I get a voter registration form?" And the lady said, "How many do you want?" And I said, "How many can I get?" And she said, "You can get up to 500." So I took 500 of these voter registration forms, and I registered the lady at work. And that night, I think we'd gone to a bar, and I was drunk, and I was on the way home. And I just stood up on a New York City subway train and I said, "Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, can I have your attention?" And everybody put their newspapers up. And I just made this kind of pitch for why people should register. And then, I said, "And who wants to register?" And, some people sort of broke that wall with crazy people on a subway, and they were like, "I'll actually take it." And people started applauding. I mean, and so I got this real thrill from that, from being able to stand up and deliver this pitch. And so I started every day when I was on the subway, I started registering voters. And then I ended up quitting the job, riding a bicycle to Florida, registering voters. Then I started a nonprofit that involved another bicycle trip. So the bicycle thing was always there, but it was also probably the beginning of having the itch to do sales.
That is beautiful. One thing that I found is that nobody that's been amazing at sales grew up wanting to be a salesperson. In general, I've never met anybody that was like, I knew when I was 6, sales is going to be what I want to do. It's not the type of thing that people aspire to do with their life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's even crazy in a culture and country like the US, where the average sales IQ is much higher, just like the average marketing IQ of people I find to be much higher than in Europe, for instance. And sales is not as much a bad word, although it still is a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Versus in Europe, where it's even the contrast is even much starker in the sense that salespeople are just like these evil, like selfish, super unpleasant individuals, and nobody wants to be like that. So, but then there's a journey that you go through where you kind of discover that, holy shit, I'm really good at this, and some people find, and the people that I tend to talk to are in that bucket, I can create a lot of good. I can make a lot of things happen in the world through communicating and helping people make a decision, right?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. There's a great book that came out recently by Daniel Pink called To Sell is Human, and he talks about how 1 out of every 7 people is really engaged in sales, whether they're a manager at work. If you're convincing someone through the power of speech to do something that they're not predisposed to do, then in some form or another you're interested in sales. I taught for 7 years, and I found that I love teaching. And like the close for me, the moment that like now I get that same sort of little dopamine squirt, when a person signs on the dotted line, that for me when I was teaching was looking at a kid and seeing, their eyes widen slightly when my enthusiasm for a complex concept has now been transmitted into a different person's mind. And the art of sale is that, if I'm going to teach, I don't know, like how to find like the interior angles of like a polyhedron or something like that, there are infinite possible ways to communicate that to a person. And so what you do is you look at them, you size them up, you read their facial tics, you figure out a way to engage them. And that's like this is sort of like flow state. It's like it's getting good enough to look at a person and be able to read them and then communicate an idea. I think that's really the skill for me. And then it's just applied to the field of sales. And now that I'm a sales leader and looking to build out a sales organization, I think you look at the total population of people who want to go into sales. And, at the very top, the people who are the best are really evangelists. They are a person who so believes in the product that it's not about money. I mean, the money is nice, but what it really is they're talking to someone and they say like, it would pain me for you not to see the benefit of what I'm doing. And that's actually my motivation. And I'm motivated by your success and by the art of what we do here. I think, but there's very few people who do that. And so then you go below the evangelists, and then you get the people who, are technicians or, maybe money motivated. And then you get to the sort of maybe the bulk, or what seems to be the bulk sometimes, which are just people who are competitive. And that's why I think when VPs of sales say I would never hire someone who wasn't on a sports team, that to me is just like you're just hiring for this like crappy median, but not actually for top performers. And so I think a lot of the dirty words about sales are hiring, just from the total talent pool from people who just really enjoy fighting against the people on either side of them, which is unfortunate, but definitely a part of the sales ecosystem.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way to describe it. Oftentimes what I use is the framework of like friendly strength versus unfriendly strength. There's this like quadrant, it was in the 60s, developed by a psychologist, and it was like everybody is one of those 4 things. Either you're like, you're unfriendly and strong, you're unfriendly and weak, or you're friendly and strong or friendly and weak, right? Mm-hmm. And the typical kind of Wolf of Wall Street salesperson that we all don't necessarily love to be around is the unfriendly and strong. These are the people that are out there to kill the competition and get all the money and get all the prizes and drive all the cars and beat everybody. And these people, unfortunately, they do succeed in life because they're strong, right? They bully people around and they get their will and they impose their will to the customer as well as to the competition. But they're doing it by burning a lot of ground and in a way that is like, where their win must be your loss. So that is a very limited framework to work from. But then the other extreme where you're like friendly but weak is also not working, unfortunately, right? These people should be the most popular people on the planet, but they're not. We're taking advantage of these people because of the way that they suggest that everything they do is wrong. They're apologetic, and that makes people take advantage of them. So the type of person I always describe is ideal for sales, and the type of person that we are trying to hire is the friendly and strong, right? Mm-hmm. And the framework there is like a good parent, somebody that wants good for their children, but is not like wishy-washy about like maybe you want to take that knife away and not stab your sister. Like there's not optional, right? Once you figured out that you can help that customer, once you figure out that it's a good fit, then you find it your responsibility and you tell people what needs to happen next and you guide them and you come from a place of strength but also from a place of friendliness. You want them to succeed. You want to create value in the world. So that fits that evangelist role really well that you described.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think when you look at the modern sales ecosystem where there's, especially for the people we sell to who are developers who really in a lot of ways don't want to get on the phone and talk to anybody. They want to have this a transactional relationship. The informational asymmetry of yesteryear is totally gone, and we've moved into this area where people come in and they think they know things. And it's really important as a salesperson to be able to, one, provide value and open up insights that they weren't exposed to, and also to be comfortable challenging people and to say, hey, listen, I think the approach that you have, I understand where it came from. I think that we are in a position where we see a lot of other companies. And I think you're headed down the wrong path, right? I think you should consider these other things. Or here's some other thing that may challenge you, and I'm going to do it in a loving way because I want us to have a really good conversation with each other. But I'm not your waiter. I'm not just here to tell you what's on the plate, because you can go and do that yourself. I actually am an expert in this field. I'm a bright enough guy, and here are some things I think you can consider because I really would like for you to do well with your business.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so we're going to talk a lot more about like the challenges that you have selling to this type of people in the relationship where they come to you first. But let's go back just for a little longer on the BDR to VP of sales route. So we got a bit of your like very colorful, very exciting background. You're in San Francisco. All of a sudden, you're like, let's find a job. Business development seems okay, and then you're like, oh, this is actually sales. What happens next? Like, what happened? What happens?
Yeah,
next?
Great question. So, it's a little bit tough to sort of abstract it away from the actual circumstances. So, there was a company that was doing incredibly well as a startup, and then they made what is a very classic mistake in the world of Bay Area startups, which was they were working mobile analytics, and they said, "Oh man, mobile is going to be huge. It's time to go hire a VP of sales from Oracle." And so, this VP of sales comes over from Oracle, and to be honest, I couldn't get an interview anywhere. They decided to grow their sales team so fast they didn't even do interviews. They had an open bar event, and it was, if you're interested in a job here, come. And I went to that and got a job at the bar. But
okay.
So what you ended up having was a tech startup with an old guard sales team in a new market. And so I joined as a BDR, and my job was just to get calls lined up. And I found that, and I may be the only VP of sales in the Bay Area right now, or at least a company of our size that was a BDR within the last 2.5 years. And when I hire our SDR team, I tell them how much I admire and respect the job, because when you look at the totality of skills that are required to be truly masterful in sales, this is like learning scales in music. It turns out that there's like this, and there's this big fluffy bubble of everything you need to be amazing at. Like, how lucky are we that there's one role that only requires excellence in these things, so that you can just do those things and get really good, and then you can get good at the other stuff. And so the ability to get somebody to respond to you who's gone silent, the ability to take a look at a person's LinkedIn profile page and understand just on the way that they present themselves the keys to how they see themselves and how they project themselves in the world, where their weak spots might be, how to sort of like, where's the area where you can like apply minimal pressure but move them the most. Those are the kinds of things you want to learn. You want to learn when you're dealing with relatively low stakes. So if I'm working on a $500,000 deal and I can't get a guy to respond to me, now is not the time to figure out how to get a person to respond when they're not responding. And I think so many people want to go so quickly. Companies in the Valley now grow so fast, and everybody starts as a BDR and they want to move right up. And I think at the end of the day, when this go-go heyday of tech sort of starts, whatever happens to it, it's going to come down to who has verifiable skills in a much tougher market where money isn't as easy. And so I worked on that for 6 months and really tried to master the craft. I like to think of it as being a first-time locksmith, where I'll look at a persona and I'll sort of build I'll work really hard on the right email to unlock this person. It's like making a key. And then when I unlock them and I get that launch, I get them to agree to a call, I now put that key up on the wall. And at the end of 6 months, I had a wall of keys where I could just look at a person. Oh, they went to this school. Oh, they have a picture of them going fishing in their LinkedIn profile. Oh, they posted this on, in Twitter. And I just sort of knew how to talk to people. At that point, the company sort of predictably, the sales part of the org had started to collapse. The entire Oracle leadership was all removed. The company was in dire straits. I moved into a closing role as an AE, and I did that for 6 months, and closed my first deals and closed some really big deals and had some great experiences and was relatively unsupervised and was able to just sort of like figure out my way. And then I got an opportunity to join Segment as the first employee. They were just 4 guys. They had a sales advisor who, through the grapevine, heard about me, and he asked me to come over as the first salesperson. So the journey from there is doing BDR work, doing SDR work, doing AE work. And then over the past couple of years, hiring my first SDR, hiring an AM, hiring an SE team, hiring an AE team, building out the processes and the functions, sales ops, comp models, and then, just sort of moving more into management.
Right on, pretty exceptional. I love the way that you think about these things. And, even just you talking about, well, number one, you come from a different place of authority and authenticity when you hire people and you not just teach them and tell them what to do, but you can talk about it, not from experience that's 20 years ago, but that's like 2 years ago, right? That just comes from a completely different place. And I always say, I tell people, when you want really great advice, go and get it from somebody that's 1 year ahead of you, not 20, because that person can offer inspiration, but maybe not super practical advice. So I think that like both having done it recently, and having an appreciation for it, and like not just seeing, the SDR role is kind of the pain you have to go through to get to something else, right?
Yeah,
it's like,
that is not,
that is
bad, like a fundamental misunderstanding of the value of your own time as a human being, and of mastering a craft. I mean, being a great SDR is an incredible thing. And if it's the kind of SDR role or a BDR role where it's just, smile, dial, pound the phones, churn and burn, then maybe, if somebody's counting how many calls you make a day and says you have to make 50 calls a day, and you're the kind of person that likes to, have a higher batting average on fewer at bats, and you don't have that kind of flexibility, then I think, you should get to a place where, you should move over to a job where you have some more flexibility to develop your own skill set and find what works for you. But one question I know you had sent me ahead of time was, for people who want to get to VP of sales level, what do they need to do? And, I think it's a valid question, and I can understand why a lot of people want to move up in their career. But at the same time, being a VP of sales is also a totally different role, and in so many ways not desirable if what you really want to do is good at sales. And so many of the things that I loved about sales are entirely lost to me right now. And so I think people should really get good and find the value in the things that they do, and sometimes like the org chart progression is a little bit less like the fun kind of goes away a little bit, as you move on.
Yeah. I mean, a VP of sales fundamentally, and this is why when a startup is really early stage, it's a very bad idea as the first hire to hire somebody super senior as a VP of sales, is that it's a totally different role. Your skill sets are all about like compensation structures, hiring, training, org structures. Like, you're all about like architecting this thing to scale, which is a super valuable skill set, but not what you necessarily need when you have like 5 paying customers and you're trying to figure out how to make a sale even happen in a repeatable way, right? So there's a time and place for everything, but there's all different skill sets required. But the other thing that I want to highlight to what you said, and this is always like the fundamentals, right? It's always like, what's the best way to lose weight? Broccoli and workout. Like, there's no magic to this, but we don't want to eat broccoli and work out. So we're all on this hunt for this magical new book or new methodology, a new way. And what my interpretation of a lot of the things that you said, and one of the reasons why you progress so fast, not just that there is clearly talent, right? Natural talent there, but also that there was a focus on mastering what you're doing without being distracted by what's next, without thinking the next 10 steps ahead. You just dove in and said, what am I doing today? How can I master this? How can I produce as much as possible, become as good as possible in that? And when you do that, when you just focus on your task in front of you and mastering what you're currently doing, the progression in the org chart happens automatically. Like that just is a natural function of you killing it and standing out in your current position. But people a lot of times, they don't want to do the work to master the current position. They're thinking, what is a way for me to get out of the position I'm in right now and get to that next thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you just have to stay away from that. I think when you get really, really good at the things that you do, you generally do that. Well, so one of my biases as a manager is, I try to push a lot of systems building out onto the team. So, our hiring system, our onboarding system, our training system, our feedback system, our mentor system, our quarterly business review system, our kickoff call system, and I work with people who can, sort of build those things out. What is our efficient inbound sort of triage system going to look like? And when I go through things with people on the team, to me, seeing good, clear writing is an easy heuristic for good, clear thinking and lots of research. And when I see that a person is writing really clearly, then I know that there's a lot, it's sort of like the tip of the iceberg. I know that there's a lot of stuff that went into that thinking that brought them to this point. And I think that when you look to master your job, if you're really focused on being very, very good at it, you're going to have to think so hard about so many other, options and then throw them all out that later it just bleeds out in every conversation you're going to have with a manager where you say, oh yeah, I thought about that, but I read this blog, or I saw this Tom Tungu's post, or I was on SaaStr, or, I talked to somebody at this company, or I went to this meetup and it turns out they did it and these are the problems that they ran into and that's why I chose this. And then it just becomes so easy as a manager, as an executive, to look at the people that make those kinds of decisions, that think about their role in that way and say, wow, this is a person who really thinks deeply. And I want that person now to start thinking deeply about team problems instead of just their own tasks.
Yeah, I love that. All right, so let's switch to the setup that you guys have at Segment, specifically both for the type of customer that you're attracting and also for the way that you've set up the sales team and the way that your sales process looks like. Maybe just a sentence, and we should have done this beforehand, but it wasn't as relevant up until this point. Maybe for the few people that don't know what Segment is. I know it can't be too many in the startup world, but maybe just for them in a sense or two, like the elevator pitch. What is Segment? Who is your customer? And then let's dive into what is the sales process looking like for you guys, and what's the sales team looking like that you're leading?
Yeah. So a whole bunch of questions wrapped up in there. So I'm just gonna kind of start pouring it out now. Segment is a customer data hub, so that companies that use lots of different third-party technologies, analytics, email, A/B testing, help desk, live chat, ad pixels. Instead of integrating each of those tools separately, they simply integrate Segment and then use toggle switches to turn those tools on. You can think of Segment as like the wiring in your house that allows you to plug in and out different appliances without having to rewire each appliance. We handle all the data flows under the cover so that there's no integration required to use third-party tools. The business is set up in sort of two different parts, which is pretty significant, and it affects how we do things. We have a self-service side of the business, where prices range from free up to currently about $450 a month. We may change pricing or add additional, plans soon. And that's got several thousand customers, and there's no real sales process that happens there. Everything is fully automated. This is really developers coming in, they read the docs, they look at the price, they enter their credit card, we process it through Stripe. They're up and running, easy peasy. And those people are served through a customer success team that's, sort of technical support, all done through email. We have another side of the business, which is, what we call our business tier plans. And these are annual upfront plans that range from, the tens to the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and now, even onwards from there. This is obviously a much smaller percentage of our customer base overall, but is a very significant chunk of the revenue. And so when we look at our customer base, we're ranging from, YC companies, of which we were one, and we love those guys and support them, and we're hoping they grow really quickly. We're looking at really small teams all the way up to Fortune 100 companies, or even teams within Fortune 100 companies, skunkworks projects, individual units, things like that. So Segment sort of spans the scope of the business, but my sort of remit are those deals that are these negotiated annual upfront deals that start in the tens of thousands of dollars. So one of the first complexities that we have as a young business is just who we sell to, because even those deals we sell to all different sizes of companies. Another challenge that we face as a business is the personas, as you mentioned, of who we sell to. So developers love us, and that's probably why we're so popular in the Valley. But the benefit that we provide is not just to developers who say, okay, I don't have to integrate a bunch of tools anymore. So the next time marketing comes to the developers and says, hey, developer Dave, we need you to integrate, Amplitude. Developer Dave says, enough. I'm just going to integrate Segment and turn on Amplitude. Well, it turns out that benefits the developers, but it also benefits the marketers. It also benefits the product team. It also benefits the BI team, or the chief data officer, the data architects and the data scientists, because now they have a common canonical model. And then it also benefits executives who just see Segment as a cost-cutting tool because they don't have to pay to have all this work done and things happen faster. So one of the challenges that we have as a business is we're selling to all different sizes of companies. And then we're also selling to 5 distinct personas in the companies: executives, marketing, product, BI, and engineering. And so in the early days, the way that the team grew was, first I closed all of the deals. I think I closed the first $2 million in revenue. Then we brought in a sales rep, and then we quickly reached a sales team of 6 people. And we just split it up in the way that I thought was the most fair, which was East and West by first letter of the name of the company. So A through G, H through O, P through Z. It turned out to be like a pretty rough but fair distinction between the eastern half and the western half of the United States, and that was 6 territories. And it's just important to just get this stuff out there. I mean, setting quotas, coming up with territories, a lot of this stuff is pretty hard to do when you're a young business. And it's so, like licking your finger and sticking it in the air, that to come up with like much tighter plans than that, I think rings false to everybody on the team, because they know that you're sort of pulling it out of your ass. But then you start to refine. And so what we look, then we use Salesforce, and we look at stage progression rates, and we look at close rates, and we look at who's doing well on what. And we try to create closed feedback loops and metric everybody, so that we're stack ranking, everybody at different stages. And then we started to notice, oh, you know what? Some of our guys are really good at selling to startups, and other people are much more polished at these large format deals. And so then we reordered the territory so that now we have, it's according to the size of the company, and then East and West. And so over time, and the same type of thing would happen by vertical, where you start to say, okay, I'm going to find a person who does particularly well in a given vertical, and then I'm going to give them that vertical. Or I'm going to do this by geography, because I find that, I've done the analysis, and it turns out that when we do on-site visits, we're 25% more likely to close the deal. The unit economics are such that makes sense to send a person out to Boston every month, and New York every month, and Chicago every month. But then I need to make sure that one person covers each of those areas, instead of 3 people all having deals in Chicago, because there are 3 different size companies. So where we are now is we have a team of 6 account executives. They do the initial revenue. We have an account manager who handles upsells. And then all of this passes over to our customer success managers. And Segment has made the decision, which I think is relatively uncommon, but not very much so, that post-close, we have a team that serves our customers that has no revenue responsibilities whatsoever. They don't even know how much the contracts are worth. And the idea is, because we're getting footholds into the companies that we sell to, where it may be a Fortune 100 company, but a team of 30 people buys a Segment contract, we want to be able to spread laterally through the business. But if the person who's responsible for the day-to-day relationship is also tied to the revenue, then it just starts to feel really false to the customers, because they see what's happening. And so we prefer to have one person who's solely metriced against the success of the customer, NPS scores, whether they'll serve as a reference, and then we keep all of the money in a different part of the house with our sales team.
Cool. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. let's talk a little bit about. So we now know the size of the team. We know the buyer persona, what you guys are offering, and the way that you split up, kind of what's coming to you.
Mhm.
Where are these leads coming from? I know that I don't assume. I assume you don't spend a ton of money on like advertising or anything like that. So, what is kind of the main source of the leads that are being generated, and what is a lead to you? Is it people that start utilizing the tool? Is it mainly people that fill out a form somewhere? Tell me a little bit about that.
Great question. So this is an area in considerable flux, and if anybody watches this after October 2015, then you can check in with me, and I'll give you what the story is. Then we have one person who works on marketing at Segment, and is a wonderful young woman who is deeply, deeply overworked. So we don't do any kind of ad spends. We tend to do all of our marketing um, through blog posts and just trying to create value that's actually helpful for people. So we do a lot of blog posts. We release a lot of open source projects. We're really dedicated to the open source community. And then it's generally through word of mouth. I mean, that really is it. And word of mouth is a growth channel of sorts, and you can do certain things to try to goose it along and make it a little bit more performant. But ultimately, word of mouth is something that you can't. It's not a lever that I can go in one day and say, okay, we want to double the word of mouth referrals. But that's where we are today. The way that we track that is fairly standard. We have people signing up every day. So we have like a certain number of folks who are signing up every day, and they get a series of automated emails. We then on my side of the house, where we're sort of hunting the bigger deals, we look through that with our SDR team, and we comb through it, and we built some in-house proprietary technologies that scrape from a bunch of different sources to try to understand who is, if somebody signs up with their Gmail address, people are very savvy now. It turns out when we scrape it, this is actually the CTO of a company that raised, $80 million last month. And so you have to be mindful of the fact that this person signed up on their Gmail, account, and they don't want to be reached out to in a certain kind of way. But we do then set that aside and we tag it in a certain way. We also use Infer, which is starting to become a better tool for us. I think it's just one of these tools that as you increase the density of data points, you start to see, increased value from that. And so then we go from a typical number of signups to MQLs, or, these things that pass this initial, qualification schema that's developed by our SDRs, and our SDR qualification schema is, do you reasonably believe that there is do you believe that there is a reasonable likelihood that we could close a business tier deal with this customer within the next 12 months? And then we have a few indices that they may want to consider. And this is probably like a vestige of me being a lawyer. We use the reasonable person test, which is, look, like, this person is an intern at a really big company, probably not that important. Or, this person is signing up from a Yahoo account, even though they work at that company, they're a pretty low level person, probably not, meaningful. And once that happens, they try to set up a call. And we also use obviously Infer here, and then we move into sort of sales accepted leads and the mesh point between the SDR and the AE, and what it means for a lead to be accepted or not accepted, and who owns it at which points, and then we try to work it through to close.
All right, so let's step back just one level and zoom in on it a little bit. So we now know these people come from word of mouth, and usually from or a lot of them also from content marketing that you guys do, and your content marketing is excellent, right? So these people come to you, they sign up, then you have different methods to do lead scoring, right? To like rank the quality of those leads and make some judgment calls on who reasonably could be a larger customer within a certain time frame, which in your guys' case is 12 months. And these people, we said that they're getting drip emails, automated emails. Let's figure out what happens here, because so I'm a lead. Let's say I qualify in your lead scoring as somebody that could reasonably buy, on a larger business level within the next 12 months. Mm-hmm. What typically happens to me next? Is an SDR going to call me to try to have a conversation, then pass me on to the account manager? Is an account manager stepping in? Is the first interaction the call, or is it always email, and only if there's an exchange in email we move it to the phone? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, we don't ask people for their phone numbers when they sign up. That is it turns out a pretty common argument that's had at engineering, product, and design-led organizations. Like, I know Twilio went through that. I know New Relic went through that. I know Atlassian went through that. I know Dropbox went through that. A lot of the companies that we model ourselves after as a sort of bottoms up company that's trying to appeal to developers, sales at some point says, we got to get their phone numbers. And, the tech founders say, absolutely not. I would never want anyone to call me. And then, we sit and we think about it and we go, it makes our jobs a little bit harder, but I totally understand why that's the right decision. So we don't call people. We do send them emails, but the emails that we send are tightly crafted. And the value, one of the things, to everybody who's starting to build out sales systems, one of the critical things as you start to build sales systems in your org, or really any sort of organization or a system within an org, is you say, what is the mission of this system that I'm trying to build? And what are the things I need to do in order to achieve that objective? And then what are the values that I'm going to have here? Because as your system grows and evolves or gets much bigger, you're going to have to constantly tweak it. And if you don't have clear values, then you'll always tweak it in ways that maybe get you to the answer the fastest, but you end up with this thing that you're not proud of. And so one of the values that we have for the way in which we engage with customers is to always deliver value to them. Meaning we teach them something they didn't already know. We provide them something that's actually helpful to them. It's not something that's just valuable to us. And so when we reach out to people, we'll try to do some kind of background research on the company. We automate a lot of this. We'll look at what types of tools they're running on their website already. And we'll say, hey, look, we see that you use these 6 tools. Did you know that if you wanted, you wouldn't have to use those tools if you ran it through Segment? Or, hey, we look and we saw that you're hiring for somebody who's conversant in Hive. Are you doing a lot of querying on Hadoop? If you want, you can move your data into a Hadoop database this way. Something so that they know that this isn't automated. This is like tightly scripted to them, and we try to teach them some sort of insight. Hey, saw that you were looking at our Go libraries. If you're interested in writing in Go, here's like a blog for some mistakes that we made internally in our backend infrastructure at Segment as we were developing Go. Would love to be helpful to you. Let me know if not, or if you don't want to chat.
Awesome. So we're reaching out to them via email. We are mindful and paying attention. So when we reach out, we try to figure out, or you guys are trying to figure out, how do we create value in the first interaction right out of the gate? I want to show both that I understand who you are and that I can provide value based on that understanding. And then, I'm assuming there's some engagement that happens, some back and forth where does it ever, I can't imagine any of these massive deals ever happening purely through an email conversation. So at some point it bubbles up to, we should talk on the phone. What is the typical framework for that phone call? Is it, are you saying, let's have a demo? Is it a discovery call? Like, how do you frame that first call with them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. One thing I'll say, because I don't want to leave it out, because I know that there are going to be some SDRs and BDRs who are on this, and here is the most important thing you need to know as you're trying to set up calls with people. This is the trick to learn how to talk to executives. Your time is also valuable, and when you let people walk all over you, or when you send a really long email, that, to me, receiving it tells me that your time's not that valuable. When you write to me again and again and again, I know that your time is not that valuable. When you let me know, hey, you know what, like, I reached out to you a few times, or you said you wanted to call and you didn't show up, just want to let you know I'm going to be archiving this thread. If you're interested, we're happy to help, but I don't want to waste your time or my own. That kind of like goodbye kind of email, that's really critical because it makes people respect you. And so when you're trying to set up these calls, it's really crucial that this not just be the, hey, how's it going? I'd love to talk to you, because everybody's going to erase that. But if it's, hey, look, I have a lot of people I could reach out to. I want to reach out to you and see if we can spend some time talking to you. I have something valuable to share with you. If not, whatever, that's totally fine. I'll go find someone else, I think is like generally the way to go. The format, once we get people on the phone, ideally, I think what we would like to do would have this be a wide-ranging discussion with the company around what their needs are, what brought them to Segment, what attracted them to Segment, what their strategic roadmap issues are, so that we can find the aspect of our product that is actually responsive to the KPIs or the strategic issues that they're going after. The challenge of selling a brand new product is that we don't often have that luxury because there are so many misconceptions about what we do. And so a lot of our time is generally spent explaining what Segment is. We're the first company to do this. We're the only, there are a few copycats who are out there, but they're certainly not at a scale that I think anybody's routinely heard of them. And so a lot of what we do is just explaining ourselves, showing a product, showing a pitch, and then trying to set up a deeper call where we can really start to explore, the pains that they have and how we can respond to those. And that's led by an AE.
Okay. Awesome. And then what happens typically next? Like, let's say you guys have this call. It's a good one. It's one that reconfirms that there's a fit. What is typically the journey next? Because as we figured out, the reasonable timeline that you said was like 12 months, right? So I'm sure a lot of those deals close faster, but what is an average timeline, and what are the things that you typically do as kind of steps until the final close? Knock over a bottle. Just give me 1 second to turn it around. All right, we're good.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have somebody frantically in the background, like saving our printer because I knocked the bottle on the printer. Anyways, so just ignore the background here, and let's talk about like these next steps after that initial call that reconfirms that there's a good fit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess now is where I'd put like a little banner at the bottom of the screen that would say something like, leaving area where we feel like we have a good understanding and moving to an area of just like work in progress mode. We use stages in Salesforce, and we have different things that happen at different stages. And so our primary qualification for, when a call gets set, we call it like the demo stage. And in order for it to move from the demo stage to the next stage, which is called primary qualification, a couple questions have to be answered. And the first one is, what is the pain that they have that we answer? And the second is, do they have a compelling event that would happen now within the next 9 months that would cause them to actually, get off their butts and write the integration to Segment? And on the one hand, that's a qualification process where you're filtering people out. But on the other hand, the pain issue is that's sales, because Segment is an entirely new product. There's nobody who really does what we do. This is common, I think, probably for a lot of your watchers. It's like when you're at a restaurant and there's an annoying sound, and then all of a sudden the annoying sound goes away, and then you go, oh my God, that was a really annoying sound, but it's something you're not aware of. Yep. People go through all these frustrations all day, every day, and they're not aware that they're unhappy with it. I mean, I would like it if my washing machine, once I put the dirty clothes in there, and it finished, I opened it up and they were all folded on the inside. It's not a pain, I guess, today, because I just think of my washing machine in that way. But at the same time, if I knew there was a machine that did that, then I'd start grumbling every time I had to wash my clothes the way that I do. So I think that initial step, a lot of it is also the sale of exploring what companies are going through. Once we've established the pain that they have and they know the pain and we know the timeline for when they would actually reasonably, get started, they have a re-instrumentation coming up. They're releasing a mobile app. There's a new chief analytics architect. They have like a company directive to clean up all of the data that flows across the business. And it has to be done by the end of Q4. Like, those are the important things we need. And then we move it to a new stage called secondary qualified. And this is really where we start to get into the MEDDIC qualification process, which we don't adopt entirely, but we take a lot of the things out. And the MEDDIC process is really, what is a verifiable metric that we have that can quantify the pain that we solve? Are we doing the jobs of 3 developers? Are we cutting their costs with their existing vendors by 30%? What is the number where we can say, this is how much we save you? Who is going to sign the deal? Who is the champion? And a champion doesn't mean somebody who loves us. A champion means, somebody who has a meaningful voice in the discussions, who has an objective that we can actually solve. And we ask people all the time, will you be our champion? And, we go to this person and we ask them, how should we set up the next call? Who needs to be involved? Our goal here is to get you promoted. You have an objective that we know that we can solve. And so help us help your organization. Um, and so we go through all of those, and that's a really critical part. And it's also, I would just say for any salespeople out there, it's really critical not to just fill those boxes in when you're going through your qualification process, because there's a lot of reasons why people talk to us and tell us things when we're selling. Some people need affirmation at their jobs and they're not getting it from their coworkers, and so they get it from a vendor, right? And they just love chatting with a vendor, but they really have no power. And so you need to triangulate at an organization. Every person you get introduced to, you need to start talking to, and you need to triangulate and see, okay, this guy's actually telling me something different from this person, and who's right. Then we move into a stage called business alignment, which is, for an architectural infrastructural piece like us, what we realized is a lot of times they're bought in, but it's going to wait till the next quarter, or they need to validate it, or they need to get things online. And there's really not much that we can do. We've sold them. We don't want to oversell them. We want to make sure this thing is still moving and that we're being responsive, but the wheels of some companies turn slowly. And so as long as we're aware and we're monitoring, we let them turn the ship around and come in our direction, or go through their, vendor review process. And then once we come through that, it's really down to hammering out the financials and then hammering out the red lines. And deals should not founder at that point. I mean, by then, at each stage that you go through, if the deal falls out, the rep will have wasted a bunch of their time that they could have spent doing other stuff, and should have probably qualified it out earlier.
I love the frameworks that you and the stages that you've defined and how you are defining them, because it shows that you think through it very thoughtfully. You think through the entire journey. You might, and at no time do I get the sense that you're incredibly concerned about the short term. Like, how can we close this as fast as possible with as much money as possible? But at all times, you can tell that, as you said, once you get to that final stages, these deals need to close. And I would assume that because of all the work that you did, these deals will not just turn somebody into a customer, not even somebody into a happy customer, but somebody into a successful customer, which is all that makes such a massive difference. Happy and successful are two different worlds. And thinking about both what is the problem that we're solving, and in your guys' case specifically, like, you're in infrastructural play, so the one key pain point could be different for many different companies that they're trying to solve with this. So being very clear on, like, what is it that we're truly solving is crucial. Tracking, like, the KPI, like, how are we going to know that we're solving this? How do we measure this? Super crucial. Like, all these steps are kind of very beautifully thought through in a way that a lot of times is lacking, and I think particularly for the audience that's listening today, if you haven't put together a sales process, so if you're in the beginnings of doing that, I think there's a lot to learn from this discussion, and a lot of things that you can just apply to the own journey. And thinking of the sales process as a user experience, like from A to Z, what is the experience that we're giving somebody from prospect to becoming a customer? And for people that already have a sales process, that might be thinking, maybe our process is not as thoughtful, or maybe we are prioritizing the wrong things. That's fine. I mean, everybody goes through these like, oh shit moments where you're like, we're heading down the wrong direction. Being part of a startup journey is all about course correction. So not trying to maybe change everything, but think, what is one thing that's the easiest for us to improve on or change or become more thoughtful from, can be tremendously valuable. And then you said something very early on, which I want to re-emphasize here, which is that, you just, at the beginning, you just do this, you just try, guesstimate, right? What's reasonable. So I think with all these things, one helpful framework for people out there is to think in versions. Like, sales can be a product, right? And this, it might be your version 1 or your version 10, but it also means it's not the final thing. Usually, you're gonna, in a year from now, be smarter and look back and improve and change. And you constantly, throughout our conversation today, we're saying, well, after October 2015, maybe this will change and maybe that will change, which shows that this is like, you guys already, although you have a lot of success, you're not like, we figured this thing out and now it's just like sweet cruising. You constantly analyze, look at it, improve, change, and think of this whole thing as a evolving, living, breathing thing versus let's just figure out the right whatever that means, the right process, and then we don't have to worry about it anymore, right?
Yeah, no, we are total noobs, I think, with everything that we're doing. I think Segment will be in a very different place a few years from now. We know what not to do, and we think hard and we focus. What I would tell everybody who's out there who's thinking, especially founders who are like, God, like, especially engineering founders and product centric founders, there's often this real strong desire to think of sales as a system and just be like, well, what is the right answer and how do we set that up? And you have to remember that you know, the efficiency of a system has to include all of its constituent parts, and sales includes human beings. And so now it's no longer the mechanics, it's everything that encapsulates all of the sort of like variation and variability of human behavior. And so, you know, the most important thing to keep in mind as you do your startup is from 0 to 1 million in revenue is find a product that people want that they will spend money on. From 1 million to 2 million and it doesn't matter how long it takes. There is no race. Take as long as you need. Find something people want to spend money on. From 1 million to 2 million is finding a repeatable sales process and just learning, like, do the deals, do all the crazy different contracts, like find the repeatable sales process. Once you hit 2 million in ARR, now it's scale. Now it's, you know, you have your growth channels, you know how to do these things, minimize your risk, and it's a race from 2 to 10. And then once you hit 10, it's another sort of, you know, sea change or qualitative shift, and then you need to think about scale in a different way, and then from there it's 10 to 100. But 0 to 1, just product. 1 to 2, find a way to sell it. 2 to 10, sales systems.
Awesome. Beautiful. Yeah. Beautiful. All right, Rafael, if people want to get in touch with you, want to learn more from you, ask for advice or anything, what's the best way to get in touch?
Raphael, Raphael @segment.com. Happy to help. Yeah, I'm not really on Twitter, but that or LinkedIn, Raphael Parker on LinkedIn, and happy to help however I can.
Awesome. Hey, Rafael, this was beautiful, super valuable. Thank you so much for your time and sharing so openly and freely. I'm sure a lot of people have learned a bunch of things today, and potentially will learn a lot more from you in the future. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.